Recently, Russians did another mass attack against the territory of Ukraine, but it was Ukrainian air defense system which showed incredible numbers. At the same time, Ukraine, along with many Western countries, announced the creation of anti-Russian tank coalition. And finally, the Russian offensive in the south completely exhausted in less than 1 week, which basically shows you that the chances for Russian success in this war are close to zero. But more about all of this in just a couple of minutes. What's up, investors? It's the Russian dude. And let's go straight to the point and see some most recent picture. And our first photo comes to us from the capital of Ukraine, Kiev, which unfortunately has been targeted by Russians. Immediately after the air raid sirens, many of Kiev residents started going down to the subways, which can be used as their bomb shelters. And initially, reportedly, the first 15 missiles were completely intercepted by Ukrainian air defense system, as you can see from this picture. And at the same time, it also shows you the size of X-55 Russian missile, which is huge, which is like you don't even imagine this being this big when you see it flying above the sky. But unfortunately, later, some missiles they did reach their final destinations. And as a result of this attack, one energy infrastructure object has been severely damaged. Next we go to Dnipro, where explosions have also been reported recently. And then our next picture comes to us from Odessa, where unfortunately as a result of Russian attack, 2 critical energy infrastructure objects of Ukraine have been severely damaged. Right here we have the map of reported targeted areas of Ukraine of this Russian attack, and those areas highlighted with the fire sign are those when the attacks of Russians were unfortunately successful. And those areas represented by Ukrainian flag is where Ukrainian air defense system was successful. Besides missiles, Russians were also using Shahid drones, but this time their purpose was only to collect the intelligence data for the future attacks by actual missiles. And because of this, according to the Ukrainian Air Force, all 24 out of 24 drones have been successfully intercepted. And speaking about the missiles, Russians reportedly launched 55 of them, and Ukraine was able to intercept 47 Russian missiles, which brings the effectiveness of Ukrainian air defense system to approximately 85%. Usually, after such mass attacks by Russians, there is some kind of response by Ukrainian forces, and it usually happens in the near future. And if you don't want to miss any of these events as soon as they start happening, please consider liking this video and subscribing to my channel. You can also follow me on Instagram and just see how I live outside of YouTube. Alright, and now let's briefly talk about this anti-Russian tank coalition, which creation has been recently initiated. But first of all, right here we have the creation of Dmitry Rogozin. Yes, the same person who got his buttocks injured last month or so. And this basically is the robot, which is created with the only one purpose, which is to destroy these Western tanks, specifically Abrams and Leopard. And recently, we even received this test footage of this robot marker, which shows its capabilities. And according to this video, it is able to intercept the drones which are not moving, and it is also able to climb small hills. Which is like, congratulations Rogozin, pretty good creation, invention, robot development. And speaking about the tanks themselves, recently even more countries agreed to send their machines into Ukraine. For example, Poland, which after receiving the approval from Germany, decided to send its own Leopard tanks into Ukraine, and this is supposed to happen in the next several weeks. Then we have the United Kingdom, which also agreed to send its own tanks Challenger 2 to Ukraine, and besides that, they also agreed to train Ukrainian soldiers how to use them, starting next week. And ultimately, we have Canada, which also agreed to send 4 of its Leopard 2 tanks to Ukraine. And so right here, we have this most recent table which shows which countries are supposed to send its tanks into Ukraine, but unfortunately does not yet include Canada. And those tanks highlighted in green are those which are already confirmed that they will be sent to Ukraine. Besides that, Poland also sent some of its MiG-29 planes to Ukraine, but in this declaration they put them as plane parts. And ultimately, in order to cover all the necessities of Ukrainian people at this very moment, Turkey agreed to send their own floating power stations, which will be supplying the power to more than 1 million households. We did speak about these floating stations last month, but at that time they were supposed to be docked in Odessa, which recently became a little bit dangerous. That is why the new alleged dock station for these floating power stations will be most likely either in Romania or in Moldova. So yes, this week has been a real Thanksgiving to Ukraine. And so I also wanted to extend this gratitude to you for watching my videos and supporting my work. That is why I'm extending this 1 week free access to my Patreon. This is basically the place where I upload all the uncensored and raw footage which did not make into my daily episodes. And if you want to access literally hundreds of photos and videos that I upload there every single week, the link will be down below. Alright, and before I talk about some interesting developments in the east, and to be honest, humiliating defeat of Russians in the south, allow me to give you a very quick 3 news. And first of all, according to the Assistant Secretary of the State Victoria Nuland, the Washington is ready to ease its sanctions against Russia in case Russia is ready for serious negotiations and ready to withdraw the troops. The reaction of the internet community was pretty much divided, with the majority of people supporting this decision because they want this war to be over as soon as possible. And the rest, predominantly those who unconditionally support Ukraine, think that this agreement is basically a nonsense and Ukraine will be able to win on its own. So just please let me know in the comments what do you think about this proposal. The second news also came to us from the US, which recently recognized Wagner as a transnational criminal organization. This means that there will be sanctions against Wagner and its people and also other organizations which support the activities of Wagner. And this is not only because of Wagner is doing in Ukraine, it is also because of previous Wagner activities in Central African Republic and in Mali. And the third news is that President Zelensky said that he is completely uninterested in any sort of negotiations with President Putin, who is right now to Zelensky is nobody. Zelensky said that it is pretty pointless to make any agreements with the Russian government because sooner or later they will inevitably break them. And then he added that ultimately Ukraine is open to a dialogue with Russia as long as they withdraw their troops from their territories. Which is, pretty reasonable demand to end the war, right? And in response to that, the press secretary of Russia, Dmitry Peskov, not Vladimir Putin himself, Dmitry Peskov, he said that no, Zelensky is the one who is not interesting to us. We said it first. Recorded like this, we said it first. And then Peskov added that all these weapons and military vehicles deliveries into Ukraine only confirm the involvement of the West in this war, special military operation. But nevertheless, Russia is still not considering changing the status of this special military operation. Alright, and before I talk about this humiliating defeat of Russians in the south, allow me to give you a very brief update from the east. And first of all, according to the report by the Institute for the Study of War, Ukrainians most likely made some gains closer to Kreminna. And Russians after this launched their own offensive in order to try to regain their lost positions. And at the same time, it has been reported about the increase of Ukrainian activity to the west of Svatove. Next we go to Bakhmut, which is until now is one of the main focus of Russians in the east of Ukraine. And right here we have a picture from one of Ukrainian military headquarters, which location is obviously undisclosed, which is used to analyze the dozens of drone footage from Bakhmut. And speaking about the drone footage, I also upload a couple of them every single day to my Patreon. And then, as we go even more to the south, according both to Russians and Ukrainians, Russian forces unfortunately were able to capture the southern outskirts of this city. Which is, as you can see right here, is confirmed by this map, which shows us the changes in territorial control. And as we go to Bakhmut itself, we can see that Russians did a relatively significant progress to the east of Klishchiivka. And most likely, this is the attempt of Russians to take the control over this highway in order to cut the resupply of Ukrainians into Bakhmut. And ultimately, in the best case scenario for Russians, in case they will be able to capture Krasnoye Hora, this is when they will start advancing to Bakhmut from the north as well. But as for now, most importantly, Bakhmut still stands, and the defense of this settlement by Ukrainians is truly legendary. And ultimately, according to the same report by the Institute for the Study of War, Russians are trying to attack across the entire eastern front line, as you can see with this number of different arrows, in order to disperse the attention of Ukrainians from Bakhmut. And in addition to that, it has been reported that Russians are trying to use more and more of its regular army, rather than something like Wagner soldiers. Alright, and now as promised, let's talk about the main part of the video, the update from the south, and also the complete exhaustion of Russian offensive in Zaporozhye in less than 1 week. And first of all, we have a video from Kherson, where Russians allegedly unintentionally destroyed a Turkish ship Tuzla. This happened a couple of days ago, but the Turkish authorities only recognized that this event happened recently, and since the ship was empty, there are no casualties. And then we go to Zaporozhye region, where reportedly the Russian offensive completely exhausted, as you can see by the disappearance of these red arrows. This was supposedly the place where Russians were concentrating their war efforts, and now look what happened. They were able to last less than a week, captured several meters of land, and then their offensive completely exhausted. And so, pretty much yes, it only confirms the fact that Russia will not be able to open another front line for the next offensive anywhere. Maximum what they were able to do is to stalemate Bakhmut and, okay, capture Solidar. But they spent 6 months doing this, and in the process they lost thousands of soldiers. At this point, the defense of Ukrainians, especially in the south, is pretty much impenetrable, and with the help of hundreds of upcoming tanks, it will only get worse for the Russian forces. Ukraine is also no longer afraid of these empty threats by Russians, and they are ready to attack the invaders wherever they are. Such as, for example, according to the representative of the Ministry of Defense of Ukraine, Vadim Skibitsky, Ukraine is also open to receiving long-range missiles. And the reason for this is so that Ukraine can target the clusters of Russian forces, their logistics and resupply routes, which are pretty far from the front lines. And such places also include the Crimean Peninsula, which is a very sensitive topic for Putin. According to Skibitsky, the supply of these long-range missiles will allow to prevent Russians from even launching their attacks. And speaking about the anti-Russian tank coalition, the first batch of tanks is expected to arrive within several weeks, and the majority of these machines are expected to be at Ukraine's disposal this spring. And this is exactly when the ultimate counteroffensive of Ukraine, and possibly even its victory, is expected to happen. And as always, if you don't want to miss any of these updates as soon as they start happening, just please subscribe to my channel, it only takes 1 click. And if you want to support my work financially, please consider becoming my channel member, use a PayPal link or become my Patreon, where there is still 1 week of free access. You can find all the other useful links to the right and down below. Thank you so much for your attention, товарищи, and see you tomorrow.